The wind came early that morning, brushing the dry hills and carrying dust through the open gates of Hale Ranch. Men were already gathering by the corral, boots scuffing the earth, ropes coiled and ready. Inside the pen, a wild Mustang thundered against the rails, its muscles slick with sweat, its eyes wide with a kind of terrified defiance. No one could get near it without being thrown or bitten. From the porch, Mr. Hale watched, his coat sharp as the lines in his face. He was a man whose money had built fences taller than hearts could climb. The men called him boss, and their laughter always came quick when he wanted it. He took a slow draw from his cigar and said, half smiling, "I'll give $1 million to whoever tames that beast." The words rolled across the yard like a dare. A few men joked, others spat, but one figure near the back didn't laugh. She was small, shoulders narrow beneath a patched shirt, braid tied with a fading red ribbon. Her name was Lila. Most at the ranch forgot she even worked there, an orphan taken in years ago to clean stalls and feed the animals others didn't bother with. She had the quiet kind of presence that made people talk around her, never to her. When the Mustang reared again, Lila stepped closer to the fence. The men turned to see her, surprised, then amused. Hale narrowed his eyes. "Don't tell me you're volunteering, girl," he said. She didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed fixed on the horse, who trembled, wild breath curling in the cool air. "He's scared," she murmured. "Not mean. Just scared." That earned another round of laughter. One of the workers shook his head. "He's a killer, not a pet." But Lila didn't step back. She lifted one hand, palm open, and the Mustang's ears twitched. For a heartbeat, the chaos stilled. The sound of the wind seemed to hush itself around them. Hale saw it too. The pause, the strange understanding, and something unreadable crossed his face before he hid it behind another drag of smoke. "You'd best leave that gate shut, girl," he warned. "That animal will crush you before you can whisper its name." Lila turned then, eyes clear, voice calm. "I don't need to break him," she said. "Just to listen." The ranch hands looked at one another, unsure whether to mock her or pity her. But Ben, the oldest of them, said quietly, "Sometimes that's the only way." No one heard him but Hale, and Hale ignored it. When evening fell, the others drifted away. The Mustangs still paced the corral, shadows long beneath the lantern light. Lila lingered by the fence, resting her chin on her arms. She whispered something too soft for anyone else to hear, an old tune, a promise, a memory. In her pocket, a folded scrap of paper brushed against her fingers, her mother's letter, the last thing she owned that still felt like home. Thunder rumbled far off. The sky thickened with rain, and the air carried the scent of wet earth. Hale stepped out once more before heading inside. The girl was still there, soaked through, unmoving. He almost told her to leave it be, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he turned and shut the door. In the corral, the Mustang stopped pacing. It stood watching the girl, rain dripping from its mane. Between them hung the thin silence of two creatures who didn't yet know they shared the same kind of loneliness. Morning rose quiet after the storm, the sky pale and heavy with mist. The ranch was slow to wake. Men moved like shadows between the stables, muttering about fences down and tools missing, but one sound cut through all the noise, the low, restless snort of the wild Mustang still pacing the corral. Its flanks gleamed with dew, muscles twitching under the gray light. Lila stood just outside the gate, barefoot, the hem of her trousers dark with mud. She carried no rope, no stick, only a small tin cup of water, and the kind of stillness most people mistake for fear. She stepped inside the pen, her every movement measured, deliberate. The horse froze, breath steaming. Lila didn't look straight at him. She let her gaze fall to the sand, showing she meant no harm. She crouched low, set the cup down, and whispered something the wind carried away. For a long moment nothing happened. Then the Mustang shifted, curious despite itself. Its hooves pressed slow circles around her, testing the air between them. From the porch, Hale watched, coat collar turned up against the chill. The sight unsettled him. He'd seen men twice her size thrown like dolls, Yet this girl moved through danger like she'd forgotten what fear was. He told himself he only watched because she worked for him, because any accident would stain his name. But when she began to hum, that reason crumbled. It was a lullaby, half-remembered, soft as the light breaking through cloud. The horse's ears flicked forward. It didn't bow its head, not yet, but its breathing eased. The men at the fence murmured, confused, maybe a little uneasy. This wasn't how things were done. You broke a horse, or it broke you. That was the rule. But Lila's stillness was its own kind of strength, a patience that looked like madness to men who'd only ever learned control. Ben, the old stable hand, stepped up beside Hale. His voice was low. "She's not trying to win," he said. "She's asking." Hale didn't answer. He couldn't take his eyes off the girl kneeling in the dirt, her braid damp against her back, her hand slowly inching closer to the horse's trembling chest. When her fingers brushed its coat, the men gasped. The Mustang didn't rear. It only stared at her, eyes wide and searching, as if it remembered a world before pain. Lila spoke so softly that only the horse heard. "You're not what they say. You just don't want to be caged." For the first time, she smiled. Not for herself, for him. The Mustang lowered its head, almost touching her knee. A sound escaped her, a quiet laugh, small and disbelieving. The spell broke when a man at the fence barked, "That thing'll bite you, girl." The horse startled, muscles tightening. Hale's voice cut through the noise. "Let her be." Everyone went silent. Even the wind paused. Minutes stretched. The horse calmed again, ears flicking as if listening to her heartbeat. Lila stood slowly, leaving the gate open behind her when she stepped out. The Mustang didn't follow, but neither did it turn away. As the sun lifted over the ridge, Hale found himself still staring. He didn't know if what he'd seen was skill or sorcery, but it had touched something buried in him, a flicker of awe, maybe envy. Lila wiped her hands on her trousers, smiled once at the animal, and walked toward the barn. The men muttered behind her, but no one laughed this time. Hale turned his eyes to the horizon where thunderclouds lingered like an unspoken warning. Something was changing at Hale Ranch, and he could feel it. Quiet, steady, unstoppable as dawn itself. The storm returned without warning, hard rain slashing the earth, wind tearing through the fences like paper. Hale barked orders from the porch, his voice drowned by thunder. Men ran to secure the stables, shouting over each other. In the chaos, a cry went up from the east pasture. The wild Mustang's pen had split open. Ghost light was gone. Before Hale could speak, Lila was already running. She tore through the rain, hair plastered to her face, boots sinking in the mud. Ben tried to stop her, shouting her name, but she vanished into the downpour. Hale's hand tightened on the railing. He told himself it wasn't his problem, but his chest felt hollow when she disappeared beyond the ridge. Lightning split the sky, illuminating her silhouette against the dark. She followed hoofprints half-washed by rain, calling softly between gusts. Her voice was nearly lost, yet she kept speaking as if the horse could hear through the storm. When she found him tangled in broken wire, the sight nearly broke her. Ghost light thrashed wildly, sides bleeding where the barbs bit deep. "It's all right," she whispered, falling to her knees beside him. The wire sliced her hands as she worked, but she didn't stop. She spoke between gasps, steady and calm, her words soft enough to drown the thunder. "I'm here, boy. Easy now. We'll get free." Bit by bit, the wire gave way. When the last strand snapped, the Mustang didn't run. He stood trembling, sides heaving, his eyes fixed on her. Lila pressed her forehead to his neck, feeling his heartbeat thunder through her skin. In that wild, rain-soaked silence, two lives found something they hadn't known they were missing, trust born out of shared pain. By dawn, the storm had passed. The valley was a ruin of mud and broken fences. Hale rode out with a few men, expecting to find nothing but wreckage. Instead, he saw her walking toward the ranch, drenched, limping, ghost light beside her like a shadow. The animal's wounds were shallow but bleeding. Her own hands were torn raw. She looked exhausted, yet there was a strange light in her eyes, something Hale couldn't name. When she reached the porch, he said quietly, "You could have died." "So could he," she answered. Hale looked at the horse standing behind her, untethered yet unmoving. The men gathered silently, their usual chatter gone. Even Ben said nothing. The air felt different, heavy with something like reverence. Hale exhaled, his breath shaking. "You've done what none of my men could," he said. "You've earned your million." Lila met his gaze, her voice hoarse but steady. "I don't want your money." He frowned. "Then what do you want?" She glanced at the Mustang, then back to him. "Let him go. He doesn't belong behind your fences." Her words cut deeper than she knew. Hale had spent his life owning everything he feared to lose: land, men, animals, even silence. Freedom was something he'd traded for power long ago. Watching the girl and the Mustang, he felt that old trade twist like a blade in his chest. When she turned to lead Ghostlight back to the stable, Hale didn't stop her. Rainwater still dripped from the eaves, pooling at his boots. He stood there long after they disappeared from sight, cigar forgotten in his hand. Somewhere inside, something fragile and long dormant stirred awake, a question he wasn't ready to answer. Spring came late that year, washing the valley in soft green after months of gray. The fences at Hale Ranch had been mended, though fewer were locked now. The men worked quieter, and Hale himself no longer shouted from the porch. He had grown slower, more thoughtful, his days filled with silences that used to make him restless. The wild had left its mark on him. Still, the stable felt emptier without her. Lila had gone soon after Ghostlight healed. She said she was following the open plains where the wind never stopped and the sky had no edges. Hale offered her shelter, even money, but she only smiled. "He trusted me because I didn't keep him," she'd said. Then she rode out before sunrise, a figure swallowed by the dawn. Ben noticed the change first. Hale no longer carried his ledger to the porch. He walked the pens himself, fed the weaker horses by hand, and let the ranch breathe. Sometimes he'd pause by the empty corral and stare toward the horizon, as if expecting something to return. One morning, months later, he woke to the sound of hooves beyond the fence line. He thought it a dream until the sun burned through the mist. Out by the meadow stood a horse, taller, stronger, silver-gray in the morning light. Ghostlight. At his side trotted a young foal, coat pale as frost. Hale stood motionless, heart tightening in his chest. Then he saw her. Lila walked from the tree line, her braids shorter now, the red ribbon faded to rose. She stopped at the fence, hands resting on the top rail, eyes bright with disbelief. Ghostlight huffed softly, lowering his head to the ground. The foal pressed against his leg, curious but calm. Hale approached slowly, boots sinking in wet grass. "He found you again," he said, voice low. Lila nodded. "I think he never forgot." He looked at her, no longer a servant, not a child, but someone the world had tried and failed to harden. "You still don't want your million?" She shook her head, smiling faintly. "Maybe for something else." He handed her an envelope he'd been carrying for months. "Then build what you were meant to build." She took it without counting, eyes glistening. "A place where wild things can heal," she whispered. Hale nodded. "Your mother would be proud." Together they watched Ghostlight graze with his foal, sunlight catching the scar along his flank like a ribbon of gold. Lila reached into her pocket and unfolded the old letter she always carried. The ink had nearly vanished, but the words still breathed. She placed it on the fence post, the wind tugging gently at its edges. "I think she was right," she said softly. "Kindness doesn't break the wild. It helps it remember what it was born for." Hale's throat tightened. "You taught me that," he said. They stood in silence, the meadow shimmering with light. Ghostlight lifted his head and met Lila's eyes, a brief stillness passing between them like a prayer. Then he turned toward the open hills, the foal following close behind. Lila watched them go until they vanished beyond the ridge. Her tears came quietly, not from loss but from knowing she'd kept her promise. Hale turned away first, unable to hide the ache in his smile. When she finally spoke, it was barely more than a whisper. "He's free now." Hale nodded. "So are you." The wind moved through the grass, carrying her mother's words across the valley. "A heart heard in silence will trust before it fears." If this story touched you, subscribe or share where you're watching from. These stories matter.